Good morning, guys. Who wants a short video today? I do. All right. So I'm going back to verbal phrases. Going back to verbal phrases because that's what we talked about last week. A week or two ago, I talked about taking the subject verb pair out of a clause, reducing it. Hopefully, you remember that. So when that happens, an adjective clause can be turned into a verbal, just a verbal phrase. And I think the example that I used was from an essay. Um, the language that is spoken in the family turns to the language spoken in a family. It's just the the pronoun and the verb there are taken out. Then it becomes a verbal phrase instead of an adjective clause. Okay, so in the same way, an adverb clause can be reduced to a verbal phrase by taking out the subject and verb pair. Look at the first sentence that I gave you there. When the apprentice prepared for his exam, he discovered an aversion to mud. All right, so first of all, look back at, I've talked to you guys a lot about what makes a clause dependent, what makes it independent. An independent clause, you remember, is just a complete sentence that can stand alone. It doesn't leave you hanging. It doesn't require any more information to make it feel complete. It doesn't depend on anything else. But a dependent clause leaves you going, okay, finish the sentence. Tell me the rest of it. What is it that makes a clause dependent? It's a subordinating conjunction. What a subordinating conjunction does. And there are lots of those. A subordinated conjunction takes the clause and de-emphasizes it. It just de-emphasizes that part so that the other part of the sentence is more important. It's more emphasized. So that first sentence, when the apprentice prepared for his exam, if you took that word when off of the front, then you have the apprentice prepared for his exam, which is a complete sentence. It can stand alone. It doesn't leave you going, I need more information. But if you put the word when on the front, when the apprentice prepared for his exam, you have to follow it with the rest of the sentence because you just leave somebody hanging if you don't finish it up. That's what creates a dependent clause. Okay, so when the apprentice prepared for his exam, he discovered an aversion to mud. All right, so um, that can be reduced. If you take out the subject and the verb of that, you can turn it into a verbal phrase. Preparing for his exam, he discovered an aversion to mud. So what you've just done is take the subject and the verb phrase out of that, reducing it to a verbal phrase. And you remember, a verbal phrase is a phrase that starts with an ing or a past tense ed, or if it's an irregular verb, it might be an en. A verb that ends that way, creating a phrase using that form of the verb, is a verbal phrase, but it's not. Those are not used as verbs. They're used as all kinds of other things, but you're not using it as a verb. Okay, so taking the subject and verb pair out, you just turned it into a verbal phrase. Preparing for his exam, he discovered an aversion to mud. All right, that's an adjective phrase. Look at the next one. After she finished the dishes, Julia wiped the counters and swept the floor. Just take the subject and the verb out. Take out she and finished. After finishing the dishes, Julia wiped the counters and swept the floor. That's just been turned into a prepositional phrase. So it's an adverb, basically. Okay. I don't want to keep going with that, but in the first pair, the when disappears, but in the second pair, the subordinator after stays there, but in both sentences, the subject goes away and the verb changes to an ing verbal phrase. All right, so as you are reading your own work, as you're writing through your research papers now, you may decide that for the sake of clarity or conciseness or rhythm or the smoothness of your writing or the way it flows together, you may decide to use some of those verbals, to just take out some of the some of the subject verb pairs and turn it into a verbal. And that's, or if you just want to add some variety to your writing, that will help. That'll help if you throw some of those verbal phrases in there. As long as you use them well, that'll add some variety to what you're doing. All right, dangling modifiers. You guys like to laugh at that phrase, dangling modifiers, and that's okay. It's fine. A modifier. A modifier is separate from the main structure, from the essential structure of a sentence, but it does have to be connected. And the connection can be a firm connection or it can be kind of loose. And depending on how loose the connection is, sometimes we call it dangling, a dangling modifier. Verbal phrases are really prone to this. They can dangle off the end and not make a whole lot of sense. But if a verbal phrase is connected to the sentence, setting it off with commas. If you've got a verbal phrase at the beginning or at the end and it's set off with commas, that phrase, that verbal phrase goes with the grammatical subject of the sentence. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Listening to the Pilgrim's Progress, the troubles of the Christian life were suddenly more understandable. All right, so first, let's not look at that. Don't look at the verbal phrase at the beginning. Just look at the troubles of the Christian life were suddenly more understandable. Where's the subject of the sentence? Troubles. Troubles. So now that you have that verbal phrase attached to the beginning, that verbal phrase goes with the subject of the sentence. It's the subject doing the listening. So here it's the troubles listening to the Pilgrim's Progress, and that doesn't make sense. The troubles are not listening to the Pilgrim's Progress. So if you change it around and put the right subject in there so that it goes together, it works better. Listening to the Pilgrim's Progress, I suddenly understood the troubles of the Christian life better. Or you can change the phrase at the beginning. After I listened to the Pilgrim's Progress, the troubles of the Christian life were more understandable. Okay. When you use that after I listened to, then it becomes an adverb clause, and you have a subject and a verb there. So there's no misunderstanding about what that means. Okay. All right. Sometimes writers and editors and anybody who deals with language or talks about language can disagree about how much a dangling modifier can affect the ambiguity, the understandability of a sentence. Okay. So look at the next sentence. When learning about writing in a co-op class, it may be necessary to risk embarrassment by speaking up in front of other people. All right. Who is doing the learning here? The grammatical subject of this sentence is it. That's the grammatical subject. So the phrase at the clause at the beginning, yeah, okay. When learning about writing in a co-op class, it may be necessary. So it is the grammatical subject. That phrase at the beginning goes with it. It goes with the pronoun it, which doesn't make sense. But there's really no misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding there. Anyone reading that or listening to that would understand that it's the students who are learning. That's not really cloudy. Even though grammatically it doesn't make a lot of sense to say it that way, there's no misunderstanding about who's doing the learning. All right. So as you are trying to figure out how to use different kinds of modifiers, yeah, pay attention, try to make sure that it works grammatically, but sometimes it's just a judgment call. Sometimes it's just a judgment call like anything else. Punctuation also makes a difference. So if a verbal phrase is set off by commas, you know that it refers to the grammatical subject of the sentence, but a verbal phrase is not always set off by commas. So look at the examples I gave you. Pulling my chair up to the TV, I watched a home movie of my son. Well, pulling a chair up to up to the TV, pulling my chair up to the TV, is the verbal phrase at the beginning. It's set off by a comma, so it goes with the grammatical subject I. I am the one pulling up a chair. All right, so the next sentence, I just flipped it. I watched a home movie of my son, comma, pulling up a chair to the TV. I'm still the one pulling up a chair. I'm watching the movie. I'm pulling up my chair. It's set off with a comma, so you know that that goes with I. The last one, I watched a home movie of my son pulling up a chair to the TV. There's no comma there, so that verbal phrase goes with the noun right next to it. It goes with my son. In that sentence, I'm watching a video of my son, and my son is the one pulling the chair. Okay, so watch for the commas. I'm not going to go through the rest of that because I think it's pretty clear, and I probably would skip it if I were in class. So I'm going to listen to what my daughter told me, and when in doubt, skip it. Okay, but you have two more examples. Read them if you will. Research papers. Research papers, you have already turned in, hopefully, you have turned in a title and an outline and sources and note cards. Some of you did not turn in very many note cards, so you're going to need to beef that up a little bit. You're going to need more than a few, probably. What else? You've turned in your introduction. Hopefully you've turned in your introduction. All right, so now we're heading into the body of this paper, and you may have 3 main points. You may have 5 main points. Most of you have 3 main points. So your assignment this week is going to be the body points 1 and 2. That's what you need to get through. If you have 5 body points, then turn in 2/3 of those. Turn in 3 out of 5. I'm just trying to help you get through your research paper at a good clip. I'm trying to help you pace yourself so that you don't wait until the last week to try to do your introduction and all your note cards and find your sources and get the paper written all in 3 days. It's a terrible thing to do to yourself, and I'm trying to help you with that. So this week, your assignment is to turn in body points 1 and 2. Okay, before we go into spring break. Next week is farm day at the Quinn's place. Your homework is still due Wednesday night. Today is Thursday. Your homework is still due next Wednesday night. So then you go to farm day next Thursday. The week after that is spring break. So I will not see you in class again until the first week of April. Your homework is still due. Turn your homework in. That way you are free to do whatever you do for spring break, and you don't have to think about writing a paper. But once you get through the first two of your 3 points of your body, you have most of the work done. You have most of the work done. You have all your note cards done. You have your outline created. You know where you're going with all that will be left when we come back is your last point and your conclusion and your works cited page. Just go ahead and knock it out this week. Go ahead and do it. Okay, so you are not reading each other's research papers, but I have to read all of your papers. So please be careful to create new paragraphs where you should, because if you give me a whole page of writing and you don't have paragraph breaks, I might lose it. My eyes will start twitching and somebody will need to call for help. Don't do that. Don't do that to me. When you are coming to the end of your introduction and you're starting into the body of your paper, start a new paragraph. If your focus is shifting from one topic to another, start a new paragraph. If you're giving some kind of contrasting ideas, start a new paragraph. If your reader just needs to go and just take a little breath. If you need to give me a pause, if you're reading your paper out loud and you need to stop for just a second and pause, start a new paragraph, because I need that too. I need that too. If you're coming to your conclusion, which you're probably not writing yet, but when you come to your conclusion, start a new paragraph. It's a signal to the writer. In the same way that when we were doing dialogue and when we were writing stories and you were doing dialogue and you had to drop down to the next line every time the speaker changed, it's a written cue for something that we already do in conversation. So if you're watching two people speak, you automatically look from one to the other when the speaker changes. And so when you get to writing dialogue, you have to drop to the next line, and it's the signal. It's the signal to the reader, turn your head to the other writer. Okay, so that's what you're doing now. When you change paragraphs, you're signaling to the reader, pause for just a second, take a breath. I'm changing my focus just a little bit. It's just a signal to the reader. Stop for just a second, slow down right here because I'm changing gears. I'm switching my topic slightly. I'm changing my focus. Start a new paragraph. Okay? Please don't wear me out with giant paragraphs, page-long paragraphs. Okay, this is a process. You're not going to write this all in one sitting. You shouldn't. Nobody should. It's a research paper. It should take a little time. You should write in installments, okay? Um, if you get tired, if you can't think of the next thing to write, you get some writer's block, get up. Get up and get a snack. Get a drink. Walk around the block. I used to have one of my sons run around the house when he got a little antsy. Um, Sharpen your blade. We've talked about that before. Don't keep chopping away with a dull blade because it's going to take you longer to do it. Get up, get a snack, do some jumping jacks or something, and shake things loose. Um, don't get frustrated. Don't let yourself get frustrated. Don't wait until you are nearly in tears or you want to throw your computer or you think that this is not ever going to be doable. Don't wait until you get to that point. If you're tired, change your position, change your posture, do something else. Get some coffee. Whatever it is that you do, sharpen your sword, sharpen your axe. Okay. The next thing. Okay. I don't know if I said this already. Um, you're gonna write points 1 and 2 this week, and then when we come back, you'll have your third point and your conclusion. But if your mind is really working on that third point, if that's what seems easiest to write in this moment, then write that one. Write your first point and your third. Write your second point and your third. I don't care. I don't care. You can come back to the other one later. What I want is 2 of your 3 points to be written. I don't care what order you do it in. You can switch that up later. And even with your outline and your introduction, your thesis statement, if some of that needs to change along the way, if you need to adjust that, it's a process. You can change it. You can. Now, I will say, if you have started in with your introduction and you get points 1 and 2 written, and then we come back next week and you say, I want to change my topic, that's going to be difficult. That's going to be difficult. Go ahead and get that firmly in place now. Get yourself going. But whatever you write right now, you can adjust it as we go along. You got several weeks of assignments left, and there's plenty of tweaking that you can do with your paper. Okay, you're not locked in on any of this. You can make adjustments all along the way. All right, resist the urge to sound super sophisticated in your writing. Okay, your writing needs to sound like you, and if you already are a very sophisticated sounding writer, then I will know that it's you. But if you tend to write like Daffy Duck, if that's the voice that I am accustomed to, and you don't really write like Daffy Duck. Nobody does. None of y'all write like Daffy Duck. But just go with my illustration here. If I'm used to hearing Daffy Duck in a paper and all of a sudden you sound like Thor, I'm going to say, what happened? This doesn't sound like you. Did you get your uncle to write your paper for you? What happened? and I'm going to ask you about it. If it doesn't sound like you, I'm going to ask you what you used. Why doesn't it sound like you? Okay, your writing needs to sound like you. Do not let Grammarly or chat or anything else change your wording. If you are working on your phrases and you think that something might sound a little better, come up with it yourself. But Grammarly and chat and those kinds of programs will offer you a change in wording all the time. It does it to me too, and I just hate it. I just hate it because it's telling me to change my phrases to something that I don't mean. And it's taking the personality out of my writing. Because I know good and well that a lot of times if I send you guys an email, you can hear me saying it. You know what I would sound like because I just use my own words. I say things in the emails like I would say them in class. So you know that it sounds like me. But Grammarly offers me changes all the time. Don't let Grammarly change your wording because then you're going to sound like a robot. You're going to sound like a computer. And nobody wants that. You need to say, I like you. I like to hear your voice. I like that I can tell when I'm reading your stuff, I can hear your voice as you're talking. And that's what I like. You're all individuals. You sound like yourselves. That's what you need to sound like. You don't need to sound like Grammarly. You don't need to sound like chat. God made you to sound like you, and that's what I want to hear. I want to hear your words the way you would write them. Okay? You need to sound like you. I was gonna talk about I was on the board today. I was gonna talk about how to work quotations and paraphrases into your work because y'all are coming to the point where you need to use your quotes, you need to use the paraphrases, you need to use the material that you've pulled out of your sources. And I'm not going to try to do that on a video because that sounds terribly boring. I will send you a video, and when we come back to class, I may do that in class. I don't know. But I'll probably send you some videos this week for how to set up your paper with an MLA format because that's what we're using. So MLA requires Times New Roman. Yeah, use that. Use Times New Roman font, 12-point font, double spacing. That does not mean 2 spaces between every sentence and two spaces between lines. It doesn't mean that. It means that you highlight your work and you go up to the paragraph spacing and you hit 2.0. Or you can set it up ahead of time, but MLA requires some different things, and I'm going to send you some videos for that. Some of you have done this before and some of you have not. Okay, logical fallacies. Logical fallacies, I'm going to do maybe 3 or 4. All right, and I think I'm going to send you what I'm looking at so that you can follow along with me. The first one that I want to do is affirming the consequent. Affirming the consequent. And affirming the consequent. The consequent is the part of the statement that follows the word then. All right. Hey, that's enough. Stop it. That's enough. Okay, so a valid premise. And a premise is just the statement that you're building your argument on. All right. Premise 1. If X, then Y. Premise 2. X is true, and the conclusion is therefore Y must be true. That's valid. All right, and the way this works is if X, if someone is allergic to milk, that's X, then Y. He doesn't drink it. So if X, then Y. If he's allergic to milk, he doesn't drink it. X is true. Phil is allergic to milk. Then the conclusion is Y. He doesn't drink it. All right, so if X, then Y. If X is true, then Y is true. All right. So now if you affirm the wrong thing, if you affirm the Y part, the part that comes after then, it doesn't necessarily follow. The argument doesn't necessarily work. Okay, so now we're gonna flip it around. This is an invalid argument. If X, then Y. That starts the same way. But now you're gonna say if Y is true, if the ending part of it is true, then the beginning part must also be true. All right, if Y is true, then X must be true. If someone is allergic to milk, he doesn't drink it. If X, then Y. It's the same way we started the last one. Okay, so now we're going to go backwards. We're going to say then Y. Okay, but we're going to flip it. He doesn't drink it, therefore Phil is allergic to milk. Doesn't necessarily follow. Phil might just not like milk. He might not be allergic, he might just not like it. So this is called affirming the consequent. It's a logical fallacy because it doesn't necessarily follow. If you affirm the wrong part, it doesn't necessarily follow. So here's another one. A valid argument is if a man is a plumber, he uses tools. If X, then Y. If he's a plumber, he uses tools. All right. X is true. Jeb is a plumber. Then Y, the conclusion is Jeb uses tools. That follows. It all makes sense. But now we're going to go backwards in that. We're going to affirm the consequent. We're going to affirm the wrong part. If a man is a plumber, he uses tools. That's right. If X, then Y. Jeb uses tools, therefore Jeb is a plumber. We have affirmed the wrong part and we got the argument backwards. It doesn't necessarily follow that just because Jeb uses tools that he's a plumber. Right. So I'm not going to keep there. I gave you some more there and two more. I'm not going to keep going with that. I'm going to move to the next part. The next one is denying the antecedent, and this is it's a similar kind of argument, but here you're looking at the antecedent. You're looking at the first part. Remember, the antecedent is something that comes before, and usually we talk about this with pronouns. Okay, so the antecedent is the part that comes after if. All right, and so the way this goes, I'm going to use some different letters. If P, then Q. Not P, therefore not Q. All right, so if P, then Q. That's the way that this works. The first one is P. So if the first one is wrong, then the second one is also wrong. If the first one doesn't work, the second one also doesn't work. Okay, so here's an example. Here's an example of the fallacy. If I study hard, then I'll pass the exam. If P, then Q. If I study hard, then I'll pass the exam. I didn't study hard, not P. Therefore, I won't pass the exam. Therefore, not Q. Okay. Doesn't necessarily follow that you won't pass the exam if you didn't study hard, because I know some of you have passed exams when you didn't study. All right. The next one, if she's a nurse, she works with patients. She's not a nurse, so she doesn't work with patients. You're denying the first one, and so you're also denying the second one. You're denying the first part, the antecedent, so you're also denying what comes after it, the conclusion, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. That's called denying the antecedent. And I gave you some other examples of that. Okay, but I'm not going to keep going. Not going to keep going with that. I'm moving to the next thing. The next one is called distinction without a difference. So really, what's happening here is that a speaker or an author is usually intentionally trying to muddy things up, intentionally trying to create confusion by avoiding saying something that maybe there's a bad connotation, or maybe it makes them look bad or something, and they don't want to say it that way. So basically they're saying the same thing but using different words. So they're trying to create a distinction where there's really not any difference in saying this thing and this thing, but they're trying to create a difference. So here's some examples. We're not lost. We just don't know where we are. So you're saying the same thing, but you're trying to create a difference. You're trying to create a distinction where there's really not. There's not a distinction. You're just saying the same thing in a different way. It's not abortion. It's a pregnancy reduction. It's the same thing. Okay, death tax versus estate tax and inheritance tax. I really don't want to talk about that one. I was watching this video the other day, and it was a man talking about this fallacy, and he said that he sometimes watches British Parliament and the way that they interact with each other and the rules and kind of the way they handle their business. And there are some things that you can't say. They can't say, or they'll be dismissed from Parliament for the rest of the day. So they can't call one another liars. And so they come up with creative ways to call each other liars without saying that. And so instead of saying that was a lie, they might say something like that was a terminological inexactitude. A terminological inexactitude, or someone is being economical with the truth, which is another way of saying you're lying. But if they say it a different way, then they don't get kicked out of Parliament for the day and they can continue to do whatever. Continue their work. I didn't cheat on your test. I just used creative problem solving. It's not a demotion. You're not getting demoted. It's an adjustment of your job description. It's an adjustment of your job description. It's not a bribe. It's just a financial gift for helping me out. Okay. Distinction without a difference. You're saying the same thing, but you're trying to create a verbal distinction where one doesn't really exist. Okay, the last one is special pleading. Special pleading is really basically just asking for a double standard. It's asking for a double standard. A driver might be penalized. Maybe they're going to get a ticket because they're just going too fast. But the driver says, "But I'm in a hurry. I have to get to my class. This is my last chance. We're about to take our final exam, and if I miss this, then I fail." I'm recording. Thank you.
Hi, class.
Abby says hello. Do you want to appear?
Nope.
No? Okay. So politicians sometimes create laws that affect the Congress, sometimes creates laws, guidelines that affect really the whole nation, but it's not applicable to them. They don't fall under the same guidelines because their circumstances are special. Everybody is required to go the speed limit, right? Everybody is required to go the speed limit, except some people. Some people are not given tickets when they're pulled over by the cops. Maybe they're related. Maybe they're police officers' families. And police officers have discretion about who they give tickets to. So they often do not give tickets to other police officers or other police officers' families. Special pleading, special circumstances. Let's say two friends. One of them is working a basketball game or something, and the friend wants to go into the game and doesn't have money for the ticket, and everybody's supposed to pay the ticket, and the person working the gate says, "No, you got to. This ticket is this much. You have to pay to get in." But the friend says, "But come on, man, it's me. Come on, it's me. Yeah, you can just let me in. It's me." Special pleading. You're asking for a double standard. You're asking for an exception to the rule because of who knows what. But you're asking for an exception to be made for you. And it's not a logical reason. It's just, I think there should be a double standard. I think there should be an exception made for me. Special pleading. All right, your assignment sheet. I have an essay for you to read. I'll send that to you. You can give me a 1 to 3 paragraph response to these questions, or you can do prose poem, whichever you want to do. 2 points. 2 of your 3 points need to be turned in this week. Prompt writing. 3 prompts a week, not just one. Some of you are still just turning in one. Next Thursday is farm day. I will not see you in class next Thursday. I will not see you the Thursday after that because it's spring break. Your homework is due. Turn your homework in next week so that you have a full, enjoyable spring break. When we come back to class the first week of April, we will talk through how debates will work because we are going to start doing some debates in class. I will give you your team assignments. You will not get to choose that. I already have you set on teams. I'll give you your team assignments and we'll talk through how the debates work. And we'll have some topics. I'll give you some topics. And anyway, hopefully I'll see you guys next week. Get your homework turned in.